I've always had the feeling that in that town, the rain brought more than just water. I can't say exactly when I first noticed it. Maybe it was always there. It was a kind of fear that didn't come with thunder or lightning, but with a strange sensation in the pit of my stomach, like the world went quiet right before something bad happened. I grew up in a small place, surrounded by a dark, silent forest. Those trees felt like ancient secrets rooted in the earth. Everyone knew each other, everyone smiled on the streets. But behind locked doors, there was a fear no one named. Rain was common there. Almost every week, a storm would roll in. But some were different, stronger, darker, and they always left something behind, or rather took something away. The first time it happened, I was around 9 years old. I remember Patrick, a boy from my class. He left school one cloudy afternoon and never came back. His mom said he'd forgotten his raincoat at home. A neighbor claimed to have seen Patrick near the forest trail, alone, walking slowly, staring ahead like he was following someone. After that, nothing. The police searched for days. They brought in dogs. The whole town helped with the search. They found footprints in the mud that just stopped in the middle of nowhere, as if the boy had vanished into thin air. It was a shock, but no one talked about it afterward. It was like everyone preferred to forget. That night, my mom made me sleep with the light on. She said it was just a precaution, but I saw the way she kept looking out the window. She knew something was wrong. And the worst part, it wouldn't be the last time. Over the years, others went missing too. Always during the worst storms. Always at night. And always with something strange in the air. Like the rain carried a different smell. Like there was something hidden in the sound of the drops hitting the roof. I tried to ignore it for a long time. Told myself they were just coincidences. But deep down, I knew there was a pattern. A secret buried in that forest. And sooner or later, it was going to come knocking at my door too. It took 2 more disappearances for me to start noticing what no one wanted to see. The second one happened the following year. A woman named Judith, who worked at a pharmacy in the upper part of town. She left work early that day because the sky had darkened in a strange way. Heavy rain, strong winds, distant thunder that sounded like drums. No one saw Judith after that. They said maybe she had run away, that she had problems at home. But everyone knew she was calm, well liked by everyone. To vanish like that, in the middle of a storm, without a trace, that wasn't normal. When her body wasn't found, the town began to avoid certain topics. People stopped talking, stopped asking questions, stopped looking. Fear began to turn into silence. But it was only when the third disappearance happened that something inside me changed. And it wasn't because of the victim himself, but because of where it happened. It was at the end of my street. His name was Henry. He was in his early 20s, worked at a locksmith shop, and lived with his grandparents. He was a quiet guy, the kind who always helped neighbors take out the trash or fix something. One night in September, the rain came out of nowhere. No forecast, no warning. Lightning tore across the sky like it was splitting the dark open. I remember the sound. It was the kind of storm that made streetlights flicker and dogs go silent. The next day, Henry's grandparents knocked on my door, asking if I had seen him. They said he went out at night to grab something from the workshop and never came back. It was only 3 blocks, 3. But he vanished just like the others. And once again, no trace. No footprints, no clues, just the same rain. The same feeling of emptiness in the air. This time, I couldn't ignore it. It was impossible. Everything was too similar. Sudden storms, always at night. Always someone disappearing without explanation. I started writing down the dates, the weather conditions, the times, like it was some kind of code I needed to figure out. While everyone else tried to move on, pretending nothing was happening, I started watching. Staying quiet and listening, because deep down, I already knew. It wasn't just coincidence. There was something waiting for us in the dark, something that used the rain as a disguise. It was on an October night that the thing came closer. It had been weeks without rain, which was strange on its own. The weather there usually changed in an instant, but that month had stayed dry. Until a cold front arrived without warning, and with it, the storm. I remember the sound of water rushing through the gutters, the way the wind slammed against the windows. But what stayed with me most from that night was the silence between the thunder. A heavy silence, like the world held its breath for a few seconds before letting out a muffled scream. I was home alone. My parents had gone out of town to visit some relatives, and I stayed behind to take care of the dog and the house. It was supposed to be just another regular night. I even tried to watch something on TV, but the power went out as soon as the rain got heavier. I lit a few candles and sat in the living room, listening to the storm. That's when I heard them. The footsteps. Slow, spaced out, sinking into the mud outside. They came from the side of the house, heading toward the back. It wasn't the sound of someone running for cover. It was something else. Calculated, like it knew exactly where it was stepping. I stood up slowly. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my chest. I peeked through the curtain, but saw nothing. Still, the sound of footsteps continued. I walked to the kitchen, which overlooked the backyard. The window was fogged up from the warm air inside, but I managed to see a silhouette passing by quickly. It didn't look like someone from town. No raincoat, no flashlight. Tall, thin, and its body looked strange, like the arms were too long. A flash of lightning lit up the yard for a second, and in that moment, I knew that thing wasn't human. I stepped back, trying not to make a sound. The dog, who usually barked at everything, was curled up in the corner, eyes wide, shaking. And then, everything stopped. The rain, the wind, the footsteps. An absolute silence took over the house. Only the sound of my heartbeat remained, stubborn and loud. I waited for hours, sitting on the floor in the living room, with the candle flickering in front of me. When daylight started to break, I stood and went out to the backyard. Mud everywhere, footprints, but the strangest part was that there were prints leading in, and none leading out. It wasn't until later that I found out. A neighbor from the next block had disappeared that same night. No one saw anything, no one heard anything, but I knew. The thing that took people had come close, way too close, and now it knew where I lived. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't pretend it was just coincidence anymore. What used to be fear started turning into obsession. I began writing everything down. Every day of a disappearance, the weather forecast in the days before, the phase of the moon, the wind direction. I had to find a pattern, something that explained why this was happening. I started talking to people who had lived there the longest. Most of them avoided the subject, said it was all in my head, that I was letting fear take over. But in their eyes, I could see they knew something. They just didn't want to remember. I dug through old town records, old newspapers, police reports. The disappearances weren't as rare as they seemed. Some were never even made public. Families who moved away suddenly, children who vanished during the night. And in almost every case, one thing in common: heavy rain in the same area, always after dark. I started mapping it all in a notebook, marking the locations, times, the profiles of the victims. Slowly, a pattern started to take shape. It wasn't just about the rain. It was the type of storm, always with strong winds coming from the south, always on moonless nights. And stranger still, the disappearances seemed to form a circle around the forest. That's when I realized this wasn't random. It was like something was closing in on the town, moving carefully. Each person taken was part of a bigger picture, like we were being watched, studied, chosen. I went back to the spot where I saw the footprints that night. They were mostly covered by vegetation, but there were still faint impressions in the soil, the kind of marks that didn't look human. The feet were long, sunk too deep for a regular person. And like before, they always led in the same direction, into the forest. I spoke to the police, showed them my notebook, my notes, the maps. They listened with the kind of look that just wants the conversation to end. They said I was getting carried away, that there was no real evidence. One of them even smiled, like I was just another scared kid looking for attention. I left with one thing clear in my mind: no one was going to help. If I wanted to find out what was going on, I have to do it on my own. And even if I was wrong, even if it was all in my imagination, I had to keep going. Because part of me knew the next disappearance was close. And this time, I might not have time to run. Not everyone who disappeared was a stranger to me. And it was only when it touched my family that the fear turned into pain. My sister Elise had gone missing 7 years before any of this started to make sense. At the time, they said she had run away, that she was confused, that she needed space. It was a tragedy that broke my parents from the inside, but no one could ever explain how she simply vanished from school in the middle of a rainy afternoon. I remember every detail of that day. Her backpack was found in the schoolyard, soaked. Her phone was off. The security cameras, which always worked, didn't record anything at that hour. Like the world had shut its eyes just for a moment long enough for her to stop existing there. I was only 12. I never got over it. I buried it deep in my memory, in the place where we keep the things we try not to touch. But now it was all coming back. The dates matched. The type of rain. The location. My sister had been one of the first, maybe the first. And somehow, I felt like she was still trying to speak to me. That night, the sky collapsed like never before. Lightning cut across the sky like scars, and the wind felt like it was trying to tear the house apart. I was alone, sitting in my room, surrounded by all my maps, notes, and records. The notebook on the table trembled with every clap of thunder. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind, or maybe just my tired mind, but it wasn't. It was her voice. Faint, like a whisper coming from far away, and it said my name 3 times. Exactly how she used to call me when she wanted me to pay attention. The tone, the pause between syllables. It was her. I got up and walked into the hallway. The lights in the house flickered like they were about to go out. The voice was coming from outside, from the backyard. When I opened the door, I was hit by a rush of cold rain and wind. The voice stopped, but in the middle of the yard, right in the mud, there was something that froze me in place. A necklace. The same necklace my sister used to wear, with a blue stone in the center, a gift from our grandmother. It had disappeared with her, and now it was there, dirty but intact, like it had been placed there just minutes before. I picked it up with shaking hands, and in that moment, I felt something in the air. A chill that wasn't just physical. It was like something was watching me, not with eyes but with presence. And it wasn't hostile, it felt sad, like something was trying to ask for help. That night broke me. Everything I believed about the world, about what was possible and what wasn't, came crashing down. And inside me, a new certainty grew. Whatever was taking people wasn't killing them. At least not right away. Maybe something was trapped on the other side. Something waiting to be heard. And I was ready to listen. That week, the forecast warned of a storm unlike anything we'd seen before. The kind of rain that swallows streets, knocks down trees, and drowns out every sound. The kind of night that always came with a strange silence over the town. But to me, it was more than just a weather alert. It was a calling. I knew this would be the night, the last one, or at least the closest I'd ever get to the truth. I spent the day getting ready. Set up cameras, placed flashlights around the house, charged batteries. I rigged a portable generator, made copies of all my research and left them in an envelope with a friend, just in case something happened to me. And at the center of it all, I placed my sister's necklace, like a point of return, a tether. When night fell, the town sank into darkness. The rain started in a strange way, not gradual like usual, but suddenly heavy and intense, like someone had pulled a veil open over us. Within minutes, the power went out, the cameras shut off. The generator failed, nothing worked. Only the sound of water remained and my quickening breath. I sat in the living room, a weak flashlight in my hand, staring at the front door. There was nothing else to do, just wait. The first sounds came slowly. Creaks in the floorboards, even though no one was there. The neighbor's dog started barking, then howling, then fell silent. Everything felt off. The atmosphere in the house shifted. The air grew heavier. The flashlight flickered, even with new batteries. That's when I heard the footsteps, from inside. It couldn't be. I had locked every door, every window. But the footsteps were coming from the hallway, then from the kitchen, then the stairs. As if something was moving, unhurried, through every room. I pressed my ear to the wall. The sound was there. It was real, but when I opened the hallway door, there was nothing. The voice came right after. Low, muffled. It wasn't just my sister's. It was many. As if dozens of voices were whispering at once, forming a single stream of pain and longing. And in the middle of it all, I felt a sharp chill down my neck, not from fear, from presence. Something was there with me, something old, heavy, and full of sorrow. I don't remember passing out, but when I woke up, it was morning. The house was intact, the lights worked, everything seemed normal. Except for one thing. The necklace was gone. Since that night, no other disappearances have been reported in the town. The rain still falls, but never with the same rage. And I, in some way, feel like something ended that night. But I don't know if it was good or evil that won. All I know is that something was taken, and something was left inside me. Something that, even today, when the first raindrop falls, makes me stop and listen, because I never heard that voice again. And that's what scares me the most. I never liked doing night shifts when it rains. And that night, I could feel something different in the air. The storm started even before I got to the hospital, and the sky was so dark it looked like night at 3 in the afternoon. I work as a nursing technician in an old hospital, the kind that feels like it's never really been renovated. Peeling walls, lights that flicker for no reason, and that smell of things long stored away. It's always been like that. But that night, everything felt heavier. Right at the start of the shift, the power went out. Not unusual there. The whole neighborhood has issues with the grid. The generator kicked in, making that deep noise that sounds like a creature breathing underground. The lights came back on, but dim, flickering. And the hospital got quieter than usual. No TV, no radio. None of the machines humming like they usually do to fill the hallways. I went to the ward, tried to stay focused. But something started bothering me, a noise, like it was coming from the floor above. Like a chair being dragged across the floor. I thought it was just in my head, or maybe the wind. But the floor above, it's been closed for years. Everybody knows that. No one goes up there. I took a deep breath, tried to focus on the reports, but that sound, it kept coming back every now and then, and with it, a strange feeling. Like I wasn't alone in there, but it wasn't fear. Not yet. It was just that first warning. That signal we pretend not to hear when the body wants to run, but the mind still insists on staying. In the middle of my shift, I went to check the night reports. Just routine stuff, to see what had already been done and what still needed attention. But one thing made me stop immediately. Among the notes from the previous shift, someone had written that there was movement in room 713. Except, that room doesn't exist anymore. It used to be at the end of the hallway on the upper floor. the same one that's been closed off since the fire a few years ago. Back then, a patient died there, and no one ever wanted to use that space again. They sealed it with cement and left it at that. People say it was a terrible tragedy, the kind that barely made it into the news. I stared at that number for a while. 713. It felt like it was staring back at me. I casually mentioned it to one of the older nurses, the kind who's seen everything. She just shook her head and said, "Don't mess with that, Camila. Sometimes what we don't understand is better left alone." But that note stuck in my head. I tried to focus on the rest of my work, but the rain only got worse. The generator kept flickering, and that noise upstairs. It really sounded like someone was up there. It was like the whole hospital was holding its breath. And room 713 felt like it was waiting for someone to come back. Maybe me. It was almost 3 in the morning when I heard a call come through on the internal radio. It was Mariana's voice, the new nurse. She was alone in the pediatric wing and said she heard someone calling out. A man's voice, weak, like he was asking for help. But when she went to check, there was no one there. What made my skin crawl was where she said the voice had come from. Near 713, my heart skipped a beat. I tried to find a logical explanation, like I always did. Maybe a sound echoing, maybe someone playing a prank, I don't know. But I couldn't bring myself to believe those excuses anymore. So I decided to go up. Go up to that floor no one uses, no one cleans, no one talks about. The access door was unlocked, and when I opened it, a cold wind hit my face. And look, there weren't any windows open up there. I walked to the end of the hallway. The rain hit hard on the roof, and the sound echoed through the old tiles, creating a strange kind of reverb, like someone walking barefoot across a wet floor. When I got to what used to be room 713, I stopped. The seal that was supposed to keep the door shut was broken, not ripped, just loose. Like someone had opened it and closed it again. The doorknob was cold, almost frozen. I pushed it slowly. The door opened with a deep creak, and inside, there was no one. But the heart monitor was blinking, on, with a faint, steady beat. And even without the courage to look directly, I knew that room was never empty. After that night, nothing felt normal anymore. I became obsessed with room 713. I started digging through the hospital's old files during my breaks, and eventually, even after hours, I asked as little as possible. Most people pretended not to know what I was talking about. Some just looked away. Others tried to play it off, saying it was in my head. Just exhaustion. Too many night shifts. But no one ever said clearly, that doesn't exist. Because deep down, they all knew. And that's what pulled me deeper into the story. In an old cabinet, in a forgotten storage room of the hospital, I found an unmarked box, full of moldy folders, stained patient files, incomplete reports. And buried in there, among barely legible documents, I found his name, Rafael Lacerda. Psychiatric patient, admitted over 10 years ago. History of episodes, aggression, escape attempts. And the strangest detail, he only had episodes when it rained. His file ended abruptly on an April night. And right after that, a fire report for the room he was in. Room 713. No one ever declared the cause of the fire. No one explained why his file had been deleted from the system. But there it was, on paper, hidden, but still alive. I left that room holding his file, with a weight in my chest I still couldn't explain. I went back to the ward and tried not to think about what I'd uncovered. But that night, the rain came back. And with it, the blackouts began. The lights flickered. The generator sputtered, and the radio started to hiss. At first just static, then names. Names of patients who had already died, including his Raphael. And then I heard someone call me. Not over the radio, not on the phone, in the hallway. It was real. That night, The hospital was emptier than usual. Some patients had been transferred due to the unstable power, and the staff was reduced. The rain hadn't stopped, thick, heavy, relentless. But inside, it sounded louder than usual, like it was falling inside the hallways. I walked to the ward, trying to pretend everything was under control. But then it happened, the reflection. I saw something in the window that made my whole body freeze. It wasn't my reflection. It was someone standing behind me, tall, head down, like they were watching. I spun around, no one there, but the reflection was still there. After that, the radio started acting up again. First came the sound of heartbeats, then a deep, slow voice calling out names one by one. And then, my name, Camila. I turned off the radio, tried to convince myself it was some kind of weird interference, maybe caused by the storm. But deep down, I knew. Room 713 had chosen me. I went back to reception, but I couldn't breathe properly anymore. It felt like I was being watched from every angle. Every camera, every window, every shadow. And then everything went out. The lights, the generator, the sound. Only the rain remained. Nothing else. And the hallway went dark. Until a door creaked at the end. I knew which one it was. Room 713. It had opened again. And this time, not by itself. The hallway was dark, but I could see. Not with my eyes, but with my body. With every step I took, the air grew colder, heavier. It was like the hospital was breathing with me, or against me. The sound of the rain now seemed to come from inside the walls, like the entire building was weeping. I walked to the end of the hallway. All the other rooms were closed, like they'd been sealed on purpose. Only 713 was open. The door slightly ajar, creaking softly with a breeze that shouldn't have been there. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was just like before, dark, damp, filled with the smell of old smoke. But now, there was a bed occupied. Someone was lying there. The body covered to the chest, only the face visible. It was Raphael. I don't know how I knew, but it was him. And he was alive, or pretending to be, or remembering how to be. The heart monitor showed a pulse. Steady, one beat at a time. And next to the bed, on a clipboard, was a new patient file. My name, my age, my job, my photo. I felt a weight so heavy my legs almost gave out. I tried to leave the room, but the door had closed. Not with force, calmly, like the end of a chapter being turned. The monitor beeped. The heartbeat sped up. And then, the rain stopped. The silence was the worst part. I don't know what happened after that. I don't remember leaving. I don't remember being found. I just remember waking up days later at home with the hospital saying there had been a blackout and part of the upper floor had structural issues. But room 713? They swear it never existed. I know it did. And it still calls me every time the rain begins to fall. At the time, I was at rock bottom. I'd been unemployed for 2 months, rent overdue, fridge nearly empty. I couldn't sleep, overthought everything, and any loud noise made me snap. All I wanted was a place to breathe, even if just for a few days. It was on one of those days, the kind that feels like a silent film, that I saw the ad. It was taped to a pole near the bakery, printed in big, straight letters. House for rent, free, unique condition, occupation allowed only from midnight to 6 a mile away. Address and contact below, that was it. No photos, no fluff, just the notice. I tore off the little strip with the number and stuffed it in my pocket without thinking. At first, I thought it was a scam, but desperation makes you ignore common sense sometimes. I called that same afternoon. The voice on the other end was calm, polite. Said the house belonged to the family, old but well kept. He repeated the conditions, Only at night, no exceptions, and never stay past 6 am. I asked why. He just said, "It's better that way." I went to see the house that same day. It was on a quiet street, almost at the edge of the neighborhood, near a patch of woods. Simple facade, low wall, everything clean, no signs of neglect. The man met me on the sidewalk. Tall, well-dressed, the kind of person who seems to know everything but says very little. He said the rent was indeed free, but it required respect for the rules. He handed me a plain key, no label, no contract, no signature, no questions asked. Before I realized it, I had agreed. I took the key, thanked him, and left. At midnight I came back, and from that very first night, I was never the same again. I got to the door of the house at 11:55 p.m. The street was deserted, and the light rain made everything even quieter. The street lamp flickered slowly, like it was half asleep. I felt a strange chill as I put the key in the lock, but maybe it was just the cold. The door opened easily, without a creak. Inside, everything was clean, old furniture, but in good shape. A dark velvet sofa, a wooden bookshelf, heavy curtains. The house smelled like incense, or maybe damp wood. I couldn't tell. It was a smell that reminded me of a place I'd never been. I walked slowly through the rooms. The living room, the hallway, the kitchen, all silent. The wall clock in the living room caught my eye. It was big, beautiful, with golden hands. But it was spinning backwards. I thought it was broken, but when I checked my phone, the time matched perfectly, even spinning backwards. That made me a little dizzy. I tried to ignore it. I went upstairs to what seemed like the main bedroom. The bed was made, the sheets clean, the closet empty. It was like everything had been prepared with care, but no warmth. A house too tidy, but with no sign of life. I lay down, trying to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. At 2 in the morning, I heard a noise, a muffled sound, like someone dragging a chair upstairs. Except, there was no upstairs. I got up slowly, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. I could hear it clearly, creaking wood like footsteps. But there were no stairs, no attic, just a regular flat ceiling, and yet, something was moving above me. I stood there, frozen, staring up, waiting for something to fall through the ceiling. But the sound stopped, like it knew I was listening. I went back to bed, but slept badly. Woke up to my phone alarm at 5:55 and I left the house in a rush without looking back. And I told myself maybe it was just stress, just an old house, just my imagination. But the next night, I went back. On the second night, I arrived more confident. The rain had stopped, and the street was even quieter than before, like the world had turned off its sound. This time, I walked into the house without hesitation. The key already felt familiar in my hand. I moved slowly, closed the windows, checked the lights, sat on the sofa, tried to pretend it was just a normal place, that the clock spinning backwards didn't bother me, that the mirrors in the house didn't reflect exactly what I was doing, sometimes with a slight delay. I wanted to test the limits. I needed to know. I stayed past 6 in the morning. Just a little, 6:20 at most. I wanted to see what would happen. The mistake started small, a light nausea, like I'd been spinning in circles for too long. Then came the dizziness. When I looked at myself in the living room mirror, my reflection was trembling, literally trembling, like a glitched video. I ran out. The front gate was stuck. I had to shoulder it open to get out. The moment I stepped onto the street, the sickness vanished. Like someone had released their grip from around my neck. That afternoon, I slept like a rock, but when I woke up, I found something that hadn't been there before. Inside the backpack I kept at the house, there was a folded piece of paper, yellowed, stained, with a single sentence written in thin letters, "Do not break time." My skin crawled. I went back that night. Yes, I went back. I was already too deep. I wanted to understand. I needed to understand. And that's when I saw it. In the back room, the one I had never entered before, there were marks on the wall. Like someone had clawed at the plaster until their fingers bled. Incomplete letters, numbers, confused drawings. And one sentence almost completely faded. Only until 6. After that, she wakes up. I closed the door slowly. And this time, I blocked it with the dresser from the inside. On the third night, it was raining again. Heavy, pounding rain with distant thunder rolling in. The house seemed to vibrate with every flash of lightning, like it was slowly waking up. I walked in already different, more alert, more anxious. I could feel something was in there with me, and for the first time, I started searching. I went to the living room mirror, the one that always reflected me a second too late. I fiddled with the frame, ran my fingers along the edges of the wall. That's when I noticed it wasn't actually mounted, just resting in place. I lifted it carefully. Behind it, I found a hole. And inside, a bundle of folded papers held together by a faded red ribbon. They were letters, handwritten, all signed by someone named Felipe. The first one said, "If you found this, it means the house chose you too. I tried to leave, but it brought me back." The others got more and more disjointed. He wrote about sleepless nights, clocks spinning backwards, voices in the bathroom, doors opening on their own. He wrote about a presence that watched his every move, but never truly showed itself, only made itself felt. Philippe said that at first he thought he was going crazy, then that it was a curse. And in the end, he wrote as if he were speaking directly to the house. "You want me to stay. But for how long? Until I disappear? Until I'm forgotten?" I read them all in silence, with the growing sense that he was still here, or worse, that he never left. I kept the letters with me, but the next night they were gone. I went back to the mirror. The hole was still there, but empty, like the house had swallowed them. And that day, for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in the mirror. There was something back there, mimicking me, or maybe studying me. It was on the 5th day that I decided to do what no one should ever do, go back to the house during the day. I got there at 11:40 am. The sun was high, the sky clear, people walking down the sidewalk like nothing in the world was wrong. But inside, I knew I was about to make a mistake the size of the planet. I stared at the gate for about 5 minutes, wondering if I should really go in, but doubt didn't win. Obsession did. I needed to understand what was inside that house when the world was awake. I put the key in the lock, and the first thing I noticed was the temperature. Outside it was hot, but when the door opened, it felt like the inside of a shut-off fridge. Damp air, the smell of something long forgotten. I stepped in slowly, and at that exact moment, the sound from the street disappeared. Nothing, no cars, no birds, no people. Time stopped, literally. I looked out the living room window. The world was frozen. A dog standing in the street, one paw raised. A car with exhaust smoke hanging mid-air. An old woman crossing the street with one foot on the ground and the other suspended. And inside the house, the shadows were wrong. I heard footsteps, but not mine. I went to the kitchen, and there I saw the first reflection that wasn't mine. It looked back at me with my own eyes, but the face was distorted, like something was trying to copy me, but didn't understand how. I ran back to the door. Hands shaking, I turned the key and shoved hard. Nothing. The house wouldn't let me out. I felt something behind me, looked into the reflection again, and there were people, standing, watching, all of them the same. All of them with their eyes locked on me. I don't know how, but I got out. When I opened my eyes, I was back on the sidewalk, key in hand. Sun still shining, life moving. But something came out with me, and that night, there was one more reflection in the mirror I'd never seen before. I knew I shouldn't go back, But I did. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was need. It was like the house had latched onto me in a way that neither time nor distance could break. It didn't have to force me. It just pulled. On the final night, the street was emptier than ever. The street lamp was off. And the sky, even without clouds, was too dark. The key was cold, the lock stiff. And when the door opened, there was no house anymore. There was a space, as if it had emptied itself on purpose. Everything was covered. Furniture under sheets, mirrors turned to the wall. The clock stopped. But the clock still ticked. Tick, tock, tick, tock, even without moving. I walked to the back room, the one I hadn't entered since that first night. The door was open, and inside, a bed. This time with someone lying in it. Getting closer felt like wading through an ice-cold lake. Every step hurt my skin. The man in the bed was the same one who had given me the key, but now he was motionless, pale, like he had been there for days. Beside him, a clipboard, and on it, my file, photo, name, entry time, 0 o'clock, exit time, left blank, and just below, handwritten, last tenant. That's when I heard the door close. Not violently, deliberately. The house breathed. Yes, I felt it. It took a deep breath. And then, it showed me. All the reflections. All the faces. All those who came before. They were there. In the mirrors. In the windows. In the shadows of the house. Philippe. Raphael. Others whose names were never even in the letters. All standing. All waiting. And all looking at me like they were saying, "It's your turn." I tried to run. There was no way out. Every door led to the same hallway. Every window showed the same street, empty, frozen, endless. And at the end of the hallway, the main mirror, it showed me, but not me now. It was me, trapped on the other side, screaming, crying out, while the me out here smiled. The house had decided, and I was no longer the one who walked in. I've always been organized with my stuff. Not obsessive or anything, but I like keeping things where they belong. My bed made, my keys on the same hook, my glass always turned upside down on the sink. I live alone. A small, practical apartment, one of those tiny studio places that barely fits a couch and a double bed. And I like it that way. It's my space, my silence, my routine. But it was on a random Tuesday that I noticed the first strange thing. I came home from work exhausted, like always. Dropped my backpack on the floor, headed straight to the bedroom, and stopped. The pillow on the right side of the bed was dented, not just a wrinkled sheet or a casual shift. It looked like someone had laid there. The imprint was clear, sunk in the middle with the outline of a head. My side of the bed was exactly how I'd left it, but that pillow wasn't. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds. Tried to remember if maybe I had laid down on that side, or if I messed it up while making the bed. But no, that was recent. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was tired, distracted. I let it go. But over the next few days, other small things started showing up. A kitchen light on when I got home, even though I always turn everything off. A wet glass in the sink, like it had just been used. The chair at the table slightly pulled out. All of it very subtle. Things that could have gone unnoticed. But I knew it wasn't me, so I started writing it down. Small notes in my phone's notepad, just to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. But the problem wasn't forgetting. The problem was knowing exactly how I had left everything, and realizing that someone else had been there anyway. After a few days, the feeling of strangeness became part of my routine. I'd wake up, go to work, come back and check everything. Lights, glasses, pillows, curtains. It was like a mental game I invented just to convince myself I still had control. But the truth is, I already knew. I knew someone had been coming in. And the most disturbing part was this: nothing was missing. Nothing was stolen, nothing broken. It was like the person just visited, used the space, slept in the bed, and left before I ever noticed. I decided to change the lock. A new reinforced one. Bought it from a trusted store and installed it myself. Made to block any access, even with the old key. I also checked the windows, the latches, even the ceiling. Everything was untouched, but the feeling remained. That's when I decided to install a camera. Nothing fancy, just one of those basic Wi-Fi security cams with night vision and motion detection. I set it up in the bedroom, facing the bed. Left it recording, connected to my phone, and went to work the next day with my stomach in knots. The first night, nothing. I reviewed the footage, everything normal. Bed made, room dark, total silence. I felt ridiculous, paranoid. But the second night, at 2:43 am, the camera picked up movement. A click, a shadow. And there it was. A figure entered the room, walked slowly, silently, to the right side of the bed, sat down, laid down, and stayed there, motionless, for hours. You couldn't see the face. The image was dark, blurry, but it was clear that it wasn't me. The way the figure moved, the way it lay down calm, like it was already used to being there. And the worst part? At 5:57 am, it got up and walked out through the front door, like it lived there. I watched that video at least 10 times, replayed every movement of the figure, pause, zoom, adjust contrast, tried to brighten the image, make out a face, a piece of clothing, something. Nothing. The camera only caught silhouettes, but the way the figure moved, it was human, slow, calm, almost too familiar. In the days that followed, I didn't tell anyone. How do you explain that someone's been coming into your home, sleeping in your bed, and leaving without stealing a thing? Who would hear that and not think I'd lost it? So I kept recording, and I found out it wasn't a one-time thing. The figure came almost every night, always at the same time, between 2:30 and 3 am, came and lay down on the right side of the bed, slept for a few hours, then got up and left. Never made a sound, never turned on a light, never looked at the camera. It was like they knew exactly where it was and avoided it. I watched night after night, started noticing patterns. In some recordings, the figure tilted its head like it was dreaming. In others, it seemed to breathe heavily. But what scared me the most was one night when, just before lying down, the figure appeared to smile. Not a normal smile. It was the kind someone gives when they recognize their own place. That's when I realized this wasn't an intruder. This person acted like they were coming home. And I started to wonder, how long has this been going on? Did I notice it? Too late? I knew it was only a matter of time before it noticed the camera. Still, I kept recording. Part of me wanted answers, but another part was already starting to regret ever starting this. It was on a Friday night, heading into Saturday, that everything changed. I watched the footage right after waking up, like I always did. The figure entered the room at 2:30 am, same slow walk, same routine. Laid down on the right side of the bed, adjusted the pillow, pulled the blanket up to the chest. Seemed to sleep, but a few minutes later, something was different. It stopped moving, froze, stayed completely still. For a long time, then slowly it turned its head and looked straight at the camera. Not suddenly, slowly, like it could feel it was being watched, like it wanted to show it knew. The eyes, even blurred, seemed locked onto mine, through the screen, through the recording. It was the coldest look I've ever felt from someone I wasn't even in the same room with. The figure stayed like that for almost a minute, then stood up, but it didn't leave through the door. It walked out of the camera's view and vanished from the footage. I paused, took a deep breath, looked around the room, even though it was daylight. And when I tried to play the rest of the recording, file corrupted. The camera shut off on its own that night and never worked again. I changed the cable, the memory card, restarted everything. Nothing. It was like the house, or worse, he had decided it was enough. The next morning, I found something on the bed. My own wristwatch, the one I'd lost months ago, and next to it, a hair, identical to mine. Since that last recording, things truly changed. And I'm not just talking about the camera, I'm talking about me. I started forgetting my days. Simple things, what I had for lunch, whether I went to the store, what clothes I wore yesterday. My mind was slipping, like pieces of my life were being slowly pulled away. But my body, it remembered. I'd wake up with marks on my arms, sore back like I'd slept in twisted positions. One night, I had a nightmare that made me wake up drenched in sweat. I dreamed I was lying in my bed like always, and when I turned to the side, someone was there with me. Someone identical to me, same face, same way of breathing. He just looked at me and said, "You're sleeping in my bed." I woke up screaming, alone, but the pillow beside me was warm, like someone had just gotten up. The windows were closed, the door locked from the inside. Everything in place, everything too perfect. I started questioning what was real. Was it just my imagination, stress, or was I no longer alone in me? I started recording myself sleeping. Not with video, just audio, just to see if I talked, screamed, anything. And in one of the recordings, I heard my voice. Or rather, a voice exactly like mine, but it said, "You can leave now." It was like someone was living my life for me, and I was just watching. On the final night, I decided I wouldn't run. If I was going to lose my mind, then it would be staring straight into the eyes of whatever was destroying me. I planned everything carefully, pretended to leave like usual, shut the door, left the lights off, but I stayed. Hidden inside the bedroom closet, with my phone recording and a knife in my hand. The room was dark, but I could see through the cracks. The silence was heavy, the kind that hides things in it. I waited. At 2:37 a.m., I heard the key turn. The door opened slowly, and then he walked in. It wasn't a stranger, it was me. Same body, same hair, same walk. He moved toward the bed like he'd done it 1,000 times, took off his shoes, laid down on the right side, closed his eyes, slept, but the worst part wasn't seeing it. It was feeling it. While he slept there, I felt my body growing weak inside the closet, like his presence was draining who I was. The phone started glitching, screen flickering, audio stuttering, and the knife felt heavier and heavier in my hand. I tried to get out, tried opening the closet door, but it wouldn't budge. It didn't want me to come out. The house didn't want me to. Everything went black. When I woke up, it was morning. I was in bed, right side, sunlight on my face. But something was wrong, very wrong. I stood up, walked to the mirror. The reflection smiled first, then copied me. And when it blinked with the left eye, while I still had both open, I understood. I'm not the only one here anymore. And maybe, I'm not even the real one. It all started on a rainy night. One of those nights where you can't see anything through the window. Just darkness and the constant sound of raindrops hitting relentlessly. I was at home, tired, just wanting to finish some work tasks. I thought it would be just another ordinary night, but then the phone rang. And it wasn't my cell phone, it was the landline. That old device that almost no one uses anymore. When I heard it, I felt something strange, as if something inside me had stopped for a second. I answered. On the other end, silence, but I could hear someone there, breathing. It was heavy, tense breathing. And then, out of nowhere, a voice. Low, weak, almost a whisper, just a few words. And the call dropped. I stood still, listening to the silence after that. It gave me a weird chill, as if I knew that was going to change everything. Only I didn't know how yet. The name the person said kept echoing in my head, Sophia. That made me remember an old case, from when I still worked at a small-town newspaper. I went to a box of old papers I had kept, and there it was, a girl who disappeared during a storm years ago. Her name, Sophia. At the time, it seemed like just another sad case, one of those you read and forget. Now it seemed to have come back to find me, and I had no idea what was coming next. After that call, my mind wouldn't stop racing. I tried to go back to work, but I couldn't focus on anything. It was like something had been activated inside me, something I didn't even know was still there. I spent the whole night thinking about it. About the name, the voice, the way the call ended. And the next day, with my body exhausted and my head spinning, I decided to take another look at that old newspaper clipping. There it was, a black and white photo, kind of blurry, of a girl with a scared look on her face. The article talked about her disappearance on a night of heavy rain. Last time she was seen, walking to a friend's house, down a dirt road. They never found the body. No leads, just silence. The strangest thing was, as I looked at that old news piece, I realized I had read other similar stories. People disappearing out of nowhere, always during storms. Always in places that were too quiet, too remote. I started digging through my memory and remembered at least 3 similar cases, each of them nearly forgotten. It left me with a strange feeling in my chest, a mix of fear and curiosity. Like I was messing with something no one should be touching. But even so, I kept going, because something inside me was telling me that those stories were connected, and somehow I was connected to them too, even if I didn't understand why yet. It took me a few days to decide to go there, not because it was far, but because something inside me said I shouldn't. You know that feeling like you're about to mess with something you shouldn't? That was it, but curiosity won. I got in the car and headed toward the place where the girl was last seen. A dirt road, kind of hidden, surrounded by thick forest on both sides. Those tall, dense trees that barely let sunlight through, even during the day. Along the way, a light fog started to roll in thin, but just enough to make everything feel like a bad dream. Time felt like it wasn't moving there, and the houses, I barely saw anyone. Everything looked old, forgotten. Some windows were shut, others broken. I had the feeling someone was watching me from behind a curtain, but when I looked again, there was nothing. I stopped at a small roadside store, the only thing that felt alive on that road. An older man waited on me, quiet, but with eyes full of things he didn't say. I asked about the girl. He stayed silent for a while, then went to the back. When he came back, he handed me an old notebook. The pages were damp and stained. He said just this: "She used to write in here. No one had the guts to read it all." I thanked him, took the notebook, and got back in the car. The smell of mold, the feel of the pages. Everything made me feel like I was carrying more than just paper. I was carrying a piece of what she lived through, and maybe of what she saw before she disappeared. It took me a while to work up the courage to open that notebook. The smell was strong, like it had been left in a damp place for years. Some pages were stuck together, others barely readable, but there was something there, and I could feel it just by touching it. I started reading slowly, trying to understand who Sophia was, what she thought, how she lived. It was strange, because it felt like I was reading something I already knew, like it had passed through me at some point in my life. She talked about a feeling she got every time it started to rain, said she would hear things, voices, whispers coming from the forest. At first, she thought it was just the wind through the trees, but over time, she began to understand it wasn't. There was something out there calling to her. Something that only showed up when the sky turned dark and the rain hit the roof. She wrote about the time she tried to follow the sound. Said it sounded like someone crying, asking for help. But when she got close to the woods, the sound changed. It became a deep, low whisper saying her name, over and over, without stopping. After that, she started having nightmares. She dreamed of faces she'd never seen, but that seemed to be begging for help, always soaked, always surrounded by trees. As I read, I started to feel uneasy. A noise like someone walking around my house in socks. I got up, checked every room, nothing. I went back to the couch. And that's when I noticed it wasn't raining outside, but I could hear the sound of rain inside, right next to me, like someone dripping water behind the door. I swear I'm not making this up. There's no way to forget the sound I heard that night. It wasn't just water. There was something else in it, a whisper, saying my name. After that night, everything changed. And not in a way you can explain calmly, like, oh, maybe I'm just being paranoid. No, it was different. It was deeper. Like something had left a mark inside me. The sound of the rain, it didn't stop. Even when the sky was clear, even when the day was hot, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and hear the drops falling, like there was an invisible roof just above my bed. But it wasn't just that. I started noticing other things. My plants began to die, even though they had water and sun. My mirrors fogged up on their own, like there was steam in the air. And sometimes I saw shapes in the glass, not reflections. Shapes. Faces? Maybe. I could never be sure. But I know it wasn't just my own image. I recorded audio, lots of it. I'd leave my phone in the living room and go to sleep. When I listened the next day, the sound of the rain was there. Low, constant. And along with it, voices. Things I couldn't understand, but that made me want to cry. Like my body recognized something my mind couldn't translate. A pattern started to emerge. All the recordings happened on the same dates the people had disappeared in those old cases. Same day, same time, and again, it always involved rain. Or the sound of rain. In the last recording, there was something different. Clearer, closer, a woman's voice saying, "Only one more to go." That's when I realized I wasn't investigating the story. I was part of it. After that, I became obsessed. I stopped working, stopped answering calls, barely spoke to anyone. It was like the world outside had faded. Only this remained. The sound, the voices, and whatever was behind them. I dug through old records, found every name, every date. The disappearances happened every 10 years, always on rainy nights, always in the same area. And the strangest part, always a woman, young, alone. I did the math. The next date was the very next day. I can't explain why, but I knew I had to go back there. That road, that forest, it all felt like it was calling me. Like I was following a path that had already been laid out from the beginning. I took Sophia's journal with me. I wanted to leave it there. Like returning it could break something. Like maybe, just maybe, there was still time to turn back. It was raining. Of course it was raining. The road was worse than before. The fog was so thick it felt solid. With every step I took, the ground felt softer, like the earth didn't want to hold me. I entered the woods. The trees seemed to close behind me. The sound of the rain got louder. But the sky wasn't that dark. None of it made sense anymore. That's when I saw it. I can't explain what it was. A hole? A shadow? I just know that right there, in that spot, everything felt frozen. And in the middle, there was someone. Was it her? Or someone else? I don't know. My body locked up. I couldn't move. The sound of the rain filled my head. And then I heard it again. Now it's complete. They've all come home. After that, only darkness. If you're hearing this now, it's because someone found my recorder, because no one ever heard from me again. And the next rain, is close.